You right there guys, this is Dale of Lone Wombat Airsoft, and today we're taking a look at Yorkshire Tactical Airsoft's The Manor. Now, as with the other two YTA sites that I've reviewed, the Pit and the Pines, I am sponsored by this site. And whilst I'm going to try and keep this video as unbiased as I possibly can, it wouldn't be fair on you guys if I didn't make you aware of that fact before we got into it. With that in mind as well, this is a first impression video review. I'd never been to the site before that day I turned up on, so everything I'm going to talk about in this review is based on the experiences of that day and that day only. So with that in mind, on with the review. So the site's located near Tankersley Manor, which is north of Sheffield and right off one of the exits on the M1. The postcode for the site can be found in the description down below, and for me it nearly got us there. We did have a little bit of trouble though. It dropped us off halfway down the A61, which is a road that runs parallel to the one you need where the site entrance actually is. So from the M1 it cut up to a roundabout. We took the first exit up the hill, and then on the right was the actual site entrance. They do have a banner outside though, so it is easy to find the site entrance once you're on the correct road. Once you go through that entrance, you'll find yourself in the car park. It is a touch on the small side, so if you're expecting it to be a particularly busy day, I'd try and turn up as early as you can just to make sure you've got a decent space in there. Once you go through the car park, if you look to your left, you'll find the safe zone with all the places for setting up, and the little trailer on the left has the signing in desk. So, walk-on fees for the site are £20 if you're a member of any of the YTA sites and £25 if you're not. If you're needing a hire kit, then £35 will cover your walk-on fee, as well as hiring you out an AEG and a face mask for the day, and £45 will also include 3,000 rounds worth of ammo and a vest to carry it all in. It is worth noting that food is not included as part of the walk-on fee. For us though, £3.50 got us beef stew with spuds, Yorkshire pudding, drink, crisps, chocolate, so we're pretty much covered in that regard. The safe zone itself is a bit rough around the edges. There is definitely enough bench space and seating for everyone, but not all of it's covered. So again, try and turn up early to make sure you've got yourself some decent seating before the games get underway. Next to the sign-in desk, they do have a small spread of the ASP UK stock, so like your general airsoft consumables, your gas, your ammo, your grenades, and the occasional bit of equipment like glasses and a riff or two. Site FPS limits are 350 for AEGs, 450 for DMRs, and 500 for bolt-action sniper rifles. Just with the other YTA sites as well, they were giving away tags to put on the gun just to see who would chrono the guns and who hadn't, and they'd be checking those before actually going into the gaming zone. So what were the site staff like on the day then? Well, they were really quite approachable and chatty. They were constantly just trying to make talk and just asking like what the previous game was like, how we found it, was it enjoyable, how do you think they could improve it? And so they were just constantly looking for player input, which is a really good thing to see. Definitely beats having a staff that would just run their thing and not care what the players thought about it. So it's good to see they're trying to get that input in to improve themselves as they go along. The morning safety brief was actually delivered better. As I mentioned with the previous two YTA site reviews, they had a bit of a habit of talking to the sheet like this, but they've actually started projecting their voices now, so it's good to see that that's actually improved on it. In the games themselves, they always had a knack for knowing where they needed to be as well. There was one or two instances where we were just wondering, is that objective scored, is that allowed? But there was always a marshal right there who always saw the whole thing and said, nope, it's not allowed, yes, it is allowed. They could just deliver the verdict then and there so everyone could just get back to the game and having fun. So they were very good at placing themselves and knowing where they needed to be to keep an eye on everyone. As for the other players then, I did get talking to quite a few of them. They're generally decent people. I did notice there was like 2 or 3 groups that just tended to stick to themselves, like they had their own little clique sort of thing, but it's not like anyone was unwelcoming. Like there was a general good atmosphere throughout the day and we got talking to a load of them, so no complaints with that. As for hit taking, I thought on the day there was 1 or 2 things that made me raise my eyebrows, but when I actually went back home and checked my footage, it just turns out I missed. So I didn't personally see any hit-taking incidents on the day, although I did overhear a couple of people grumbling about it, but then again, you're going to get that at every airsoft site you go to. So what's the site terrain like then? Well, it's a mostly woodland site based on an old paintball, laser tag sort of thing, but unlike the previous sites I've been to where they've sectioned off these into distinct areas with little flavours, they've actually left the entire site open this time. It starts right off near the safe zone entrance where you've got a high concentration of cover, mainly made up with lots of blue barrels and wooden barricades. Everything did seem to have a bit of a ramshackle feel to it, except for the main centrepiece, which was the fort. The fort was situated at the top of a small hill with raised towers around the walls that defenders could fire from. The interesting thing about it though was that the walls were not completely sealed off. there were gaps in them that a lucky shot could easily get through, so it's not like holding the fort instantly meant you're safe from enemy fire. The site as a whole, though, is virgin woodland, something that becomes very apparent the further you get from the safe zone entrance. You've got wide open spaces with nothing but trees and the surrounding hills for cover. During the winter when I went there was little in the way of greenery to hide amongst, but I'd imagine that during the summertime, once you've had a lot of ferns to spring up on to duck into, the upper regions of the site might become more playable. Another notable thing is how hilly the site is. It reminds me of the East Midlands Airsoft Club in a lot of ways in terms of the terrains, how it undulates. The hills are never that high, but they're always steep and pronounced enough to make traversing them interesting, as well as providing more than enough cover and opportunities to take cover behind them and move around to get the flank on enemy positions. So what game types were we playing on the day then? Well, we started it off with a simple multiple point objective game. There were 4 laptops scattered around the fort area. Red team had to leave them open and uncovered, blue team had to keep them closed, and whoever had the most by the end of the time would win the game. As it played out, the opposing team managed to get into the fort before we could and just bunkered down hard, which allowed them to control a lot of the surrounding area. And since our team was as equally comprised of snipers as AEG users, we didn't have that much pushing power, so it didn't go well for us. However, it was a very good and inventive game, and it actually got people running around and warmed up, which is the purpose of these first games of the day. The next 2 we played was a multiple bomb game. Attackers would have to escort 3 bombs, but they could only carry 1 at a time to 3 separate points on the map. They had a limited regen, and defenders had a pool of regen points they could use. So whenever someone came back, that counter decreased by 1 until they wouldn't have any regen and they'd be hitting out. This one played really well, mainly because the fact you couldn't just rush all 3 points at once, so defenders had to figure out where they were going to station themselves, and attackers had to figure where can we concentrate the attack. So this was a really interesting game and allowed you to explore the area, because even though it wasn't just the general area of the fort, because once you'd cleared a bomb area, there was no reason for the defenders to hang around there, so you could almost have that as a secondary staging point and come in at another objective. I really enjoyed this one, needless to say. I thought it was an excellent game. The next one I played was Kill Confirmed at the top end of the site. This is where players would have a card on their person, and if whilst waiting for a 2-minute bleed out, an enemy player could come up, tap them on the shoulder, they would have to give them that card, the enemy would take it back to their base, and the marshals would count it as a point. This game didn't go quite as planned, I think, just because of where it was played. I personally wouldn't have done it on the top end of the site because that's where it gets really open. And as it ended up, both teams just ended up camping on 2 separate hills with like a no man's land in the middle, and no one could make a run because you'd get gunned down the instant you went into the open ground. I would have played this game down at the fort. Yes, we'd have been playing there all day by that point, but you need lots of close quarters and terrain and cover that favours that. Put it in the open, it just discouraged risk-taking. It's a good game, but I just feel like there's a wrong part of the map to play it on. So maybe having the laptop game up there, or have a multiple objective game, because I noticed like a load of England flags lying around the place. If you could scatter some 10, 20 of those around the site and just say whichever team collects the most of these wins, that would be a really good one, because it would take advantage of the wide open and large nature of that part of the site. So perhaps something for the future. The next game we played was a sort of airsoft tag. They'd have one player who was on, and you'd have to shoot another player to pass it on. No one could shoot him until they had. Once another player was shot, they would have 10 seconds, and they would be the single player that was on. What this inevitably led to was a load of people just hunting down their mates, and whilst I was just stood in the open with nobody shooting me, it got me thinking on how I could improve this game. I think what it needed was a bit of a competitive edge to it. Obviously, we're just playing it because it was low numbers and we're just having a bit of fun. But I reckon if once a player was on, they had a 40-second limit or 30 to tag another player, otherwise they'd be out of the game entirely. Once that player had been tagged and their 10 seconds is up and they can go again, reduce that total time by like a few seconds, 3 or 5 maybe, so then they'd have 35. And just ever decrease that time and just make it more frantic. That would mean that everybody has an excuse to run and hide, and it becomes more stressful for the player that's put on. They'd have to go for everyone, not just their mates, just to try and get it off them. So that might make it a bit more interesting, I feel. The final game we played for the day was a couple round of Trouble in Terrorist Town. For people who have not played it, it's a game of trust where about a third of a quarter of the total players on site are considered terrorists. They know who they are, but nobody else knows who the terrorists are, and it's the terrorist's job to eliminate everyone else, whilst everyone else has to find out who they are and kill them first. So it's a good game of who can you trust, who's acting shady, like who you're suspicious of. and very fun rounds. I think we do need to put a time limit on there though. Otherwise, if there is no time limit, the terrorists will just stand there waiting for the perfect opportunity and watch the minutes go by. So put like a 10-minute hard limit on each round, perhaps, so that they have to make a move, because the entire game is based on when they make that move. How many can they take out? It's great fun when it happens, but you don't want to have a lot of people standing around doing nothing. But very fun games. So ultimately then, would I recommend paying YTA's The Manor a visit? Yes, absolutely. I had a huge amount of fun on the day, so I'm definitely going to recommend this site to people. Of the 3 current YTA sites, I do think it is the weakest of the 3 at the moment. It's a bit rough around the edges. However, I do see a lot of room for improvement here and the potential to realise it. They've got a lot of raw acreage to play with. It's a virgin woodland site for the most part, with like a lot of deer truss on the ground on the top end, but a lot of clear space as well. So it's great for people with long rifles. If you've got a long range AEG or bolt action, you're going to love the top end of the site here, especially I think when it comes into summer and you've got like ferns to dive into. But also that is contrasted by the tight concentrated area that currently exists around the fort, with loads of cover and flanking routes on offer. So you've got 2 very distinct flavours of woodland site in the one area, so definitely fun to play through. And seeing how they've actually improved the pit over the last year or so by adding new bits to the site, I've got no trouble believing that they're going to do the same here. And for me personally, it's going to be really intriguing to see how this site evolves over time, so I'm definitely going to be going back to check that out. Now, I hope you've enjoyed my video review of Yorkshire Tactical Airsoft's The Manor. If you've got any questions you'd like to ask me or feedback you'd like to give, maybe you want to share your own experiences of the site, drop them in the comment section down below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And until next time, this has been Dale of Lone Wombat Airsoft.